All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're talking college football and we're recapping rivalry week. Some huge games, some upsets, some sad days for myself, but never a sad moment. I'm joined by my co host, the man who kicked out a snowman out of the produce department of Publix because he found him picking his nose. My co-host, Fresh. Fresh, how you doing?
I mean, that's just sanitary. You can't have that disgusting behavior happen in the produce section. Haps, I'm doing great. Solid rivalry weekend across the board. A lot of excitement, a little more clarity in the college football playoff picture. But even as we get clarity in that picture and conference championship races and all that fun stuff, there's a lot of unknowns in the college football world from a head coaching perspective. Had a lot of openings, a lot of movement, a lot of rumors this time of year, and I think let's take a dive into that because there's a lot of exciting topics being on the coaching front before we look back at last weekend.
Yeah, so let's take a look at the two major coaching announcements that were just made over the past weekend. Matt Rhule, fired this past year by the Carolina Panthers, is going to be the new head coach at the University of Nebraska. And then announced earlier this morning, Luke Fickell is going to be the head coach at Wisconsin, leaving Cincinnati right before they move to the Big 12. These are both huge moves here, Fresh. I have some thoughts on both of them. I think both of these are A+ hires for the university. I don't think you could have done much better with the candidates that are out there. I will say this: if you go back and look right before Scott Frost was fired, I gave Matt Rhule the best percentage chance of being the next coach of the Cornhuskers, beating out Bill O'Brien by about 10%. But I think people saw that coming. I think they saw that fit there, but I'll throw it over to you. Let's talk Nebraska first, and we'll go over to on Wisconsin.
Well, Matt Rhule is perfect for college football. He belongs in college football. He's not an NFL coach. That's obviously evident what he did with the Panthers, but what he did at Temple, what he did at Baylor, developed a lot of lesser recruits, walk-ons, got them to play at a higher potential, got them all buy-in, and turned all those programs around. And that's what Nebraska needs right now. They don't need the coach to take them from 10 wins to a national title level. They need somebody to just get them a base and get them back to bowl games. I think that's where, they hope Scott Frost will be that consistent, builder, but Rhule's that he's that focused on building the foundation of a program. So him being there is a huge fit. He's trying to keep Joseph, out on staff, which I think would be a huge keep because he did a good job. I think the team played with fire when he was the interim head coach, and they played with focus, and they rallied. They could have easily just packed it in and milked it away, but he kept them going. And his track record of his coaching prior to that, and developing receivers and recruiting LSU, coming over to Nebraska, there's pedigree there. So him and Rhule, if he does decide to stay, are going to be in a great spot to really solidify and build and get Nebraska back to bowl game. Because you know what, college football is better. As much as we love to make fun of like Miami, Nebraska, big blue buds when they're terrible, college football is better when those teams are good because their fan bases are fantastic. They still sell out there in Lincoln, even when the team has 3 or 4 wins. And you could definitely tell there's talent because the day after Thanksgiving, what they do? They beat the junk out of Iowa and kept Iowa out of a Big Ten championship game. Thank you. Really, I think America says thank you for that. We don't want to see Iowa get beat 60-0 by Michigan again. But just the Matt Rhule impact, I think he's going to look for the right men in that program. If I'm him, I start just like he does always, start offensive, defensive line, and build the defense. Get the black shirt defense to come back to Husker land, and then you can work on the offense. But you need to stop people before you can move forward. Everybody else in the Big Ten, as we saw this past year, has very solid defenses. All only 8 or 9 programs are in top 50 in the country. So you've got to play defense before you start looking at the offensive side of the football. And I think that's where Matt Rhule needs to look at. Get back to the old Nebraska linemen. The big hog mileys up there. Run the football. If he can't do it, I think that unfortunately Nebraska might be just lost in the shuffle at that point because this is his perfect example of building a program. And if he can't get them off the mat and back to competitive, it might actually be tough for Cornhuskers to really like. Who else would want to go there in the changing landscape of the game? So Matt Rhule, Nebraska, give him time. Do not rush him in a 3-year window. Give him a 5 to 6 year window as well, because you can't. You you have the money, you have the facilities. You've got to let him get back there and compete at the Big Ten.
Yeah, the thing that impressed me about Matt Rhule is not just what he did at his two coaching stops. You take a look at his time at Temple. He had a winning record as a 4-year head coach over at Temple. And if you take out that very first year, so Matt Rhule, he kind of has like this weird trend. The very first year, his teams are god awful, and it feels like it's like a cleansing process that you kind of get rid of all of the previous coaching staff's guys, and maybe it doesn't fit your system there. He went 2-10 his first year at Temple, but then he wound up going 26-13 the next 3 years at Temple. He goes over there and is after Art Briles' scandal in 2016, winds up taking over the Baylor Bears. Baylor goes 1-11 his first year, and then they wind up going 18-9 in the next two. Wind up with that big going to the Sugar Bowl that last year, which wound up being a huge thing that kind of propelled him to getting the Carolina Panthers job. I don't think he was an NFL guy. I think that this guy knows how to recruit the Northeast. I think he also knows how to recruit the Midwest, and going into the state of Texas and being able to go down there. That's the big thing. Nebraska, when they were good, they were able to recruit Tornado Alley. And I think that was kind of the area that you look at. Tornado Alley runs all the way up north, all the way down into Texas, in Oklahoma as well. There's a lot of great football players. There's a lot of great high schools out there, great programs that we've seen some kids come out of. If he can get a foothold into those programs, watch out, because he can turn this team around. This won't be a turnaround for next season. Any Cornhusker fans who are expecting Matt Rhule to turn a 3-win, 4-win football team into a 9-10-win football team, I think you have unreasonable expectations. You need to give him 2 years before he really will have you starting to compete for the Big Ten West. It'll be interesting once UCLA and USC come on board. I'll be interested to see what he does at that point too. But I think that you're spot on here, Fresh, that Matt Rhule was a great hire for Nebraska. And I don't know who else would have been better. I really don't. Like, I can't sit there and go, I mean, the only person I would say for Nebraska is the guy who wound up going to Wisconsin, and that's Luke Fickell. Neither one of us, this kind of came out of nowhere here. I mean, I don't know about you, Fresh. I didn't expect Fickell to leave Cincinnati until maybe after 1 or 2 years in the Big 12. At that point, then I thought he might go back to the Big 10, because Luke Fickell is a Big 10 football coach. He deserves to be in the Big 10. He should be in the Big 10. He takes over. He's the interim coach at Ohio State. After that, the Jim Tressel, and we'll call it a scandal, but it really isn't in this day and age. He takes over. He's over his head in that moment. No one expected Jim Tressel to resign at that point. He goes in. He's playing with half a roster. He's got to start a freshman quarterback, and he goes 6-6 and winds up navigating that season there. They should have stayed away from the bowl. And then he jumps over and he kind of steps down. Urban Meyer takes over. And the thing that kind of impressed me about Luke Fickell in that moment was they stayed on as the defensive coordinator. And then he winds up going over to Cincinnati. Cincinnati, for the last 3 years, has had the top recruiting class in the AAC, that's what's really been kind of impressive to me. Like, that he's been able to be the top recruiting class in that conference. I know we're talking about the likes of Tulane, UCF, Memphis, all of those schools right there. But he's able to be the best recruiter in that area. That is impressive. And then he's able to take last year's playoff appearance and turn it into the 42nd ranked recruiting class. That's a better recruiting class than Wisconsin, than where he's going last year. It's a better recruiting class than TCU, who it looks like is set for the playoff. And that's better than a lot of other places as well. So the guy shows that he can recruit. I think that he's going to go back to real, true Wisconsin football, play defense, run the football. I think it's going to be a great hire for Wisconsin. I'm interested to see what he does with Jim Leonard. I'd love to see him keep Jim Leonard on staff. I think Jim Leonard's a great defensive coach. And then the other question is, who is he going to bring with him? Who's going to be his offense coordinator? And how long is it going to take for him? Because I think that he's going to need to recruit a little bit better at Wisconsin, but we'll see what happens.
I think first off, this has a lot to do with landscape of the conference, conference realignment, and money. So the Big 12 going forward, without Oklahoma and Texas, it loses that star power. And it's kind of lost itself on the national landscape in the shuffle of East Coast, West Coast, SEC, Big Ten. It's kind of it's going to be the forgotten conference. I think he might have a fear of there's not the major money deals for broadcasting, media deals. You lose two major flagship schools that really draw attention to the league, and you hit the nail on the head though when he's a Midwest guy. He's a Midwest recruiter. Kids from Ohio, those guys aren't going to want to go play out in Texas and Oklahoma State. They don't want to go play UCF or BYU. They want to play Big Ten football, and he knows he has Big Ten recruiting ties and he has Big Ten recruiting skills. He has developed a major net around Cincinnati, and I got a feeling that's where he wanted to retain that base. Kids from Cincinnati, they aren't going to want to go play in the Big 12. They want to play the Big 10. That is their big dream. Major credit, he built Cincinnati. He took them from a solid mid-major to an elite mid-major program. He got them from the AAC to the Big 12. He got them to a playoff. He took them about as far as they could go. And now his next challenge is to win in the Big 10. Wisconsin is going to be completely overhauled under Luke Fickell. No more ground and pound, 4 yards in a cloud of dust. It is going to be a little more of a spread offense, a little more of a trying to compete and evolve at the current modern level of offense. They're going to run the football. You have to run the football no matter what, but the offense is going to have a little more pace to it. It's going to have a little more excitement to it. It's not going to be the snooze fest that sometimes it can be. And you're going to have to sometimes score now. You can't rely 100% on defense. Your offense has to score points consistently. The days of giving up 12 points a game every single week in, week out, and having your offense only score 13 is not going to last. Look, a perfect example, look at Michigan. They were giving up 12 a game or 11 and a half. They allowed 20, a little bit more than 20 to Ohio State, but they still found ways to win because the offense, came in. You need to have a defense to stop people, but you can't be living your entire life on defense and running the football. You have to evolve, and Luke Fickell is going to help Wisconsin evolve on offense and on defense. The recruiting thing, I think the brand of being in the Big Ten, having that extra far reach, having the television deal is going to pay big dividends. I think players probably got turned off about I don't want to play in an offense where I'm never going to get the football, especially as a wide receiver. I'm never going to get the ball. It's going to be 7 offensive linemen and a tight end, and we're going to have a running back and a fullback and hand it off, 85% of the time. They want to play it a little more where their skills can get used and they can honestly be prepared to go to the NFL. That's where everybody looks at. Look at what Cincinnati did last year with all the draft picks that went to the NFL. Luke Fickell helped develop and get there. That's what he brings to Wisconsin in this hire, is that he's going to develop players and show that pedigree that I've gotten players to the league. I've coached at the highest level. I had a year at Ohio State. I've been on that staff there before. I have tons of contacts recruiting, and I've been to the playoff. Follow me. It's a change. It's going to be a culture change. It's going to be a real shock to the system, I think, for the Wisconsin football program. Because ever since Barry Alvarez stepped on campus, it's been the same mindset for the past almost 30 years. And now you're having this change. And I'm going to equate it very similar to Wisconsin, football fans. If you're a Packers fan, you've had only known Favre and Rodgers for the past 30 years. Eventually, Aaron Rodgers is going to retire, and there's going to be a culture shock on where does Green Bay go from here. The same things that happened with the Wisconsin football program, where you've known one thing for so long. It might be actually be a good culture shock where you're evolving and you're going to hit the 21st century, albeit 22 years late. You've been successful and been able to survive at this point. Going forward, you need to be better. Luke Fickell also gets a fresh start, and it really a challenge to see how he can actually coach the Big Ten on his second turnaround.
Yeah. All right, Fresh, let's talk about this weekend here. Let's talk winners and losers. you know where I'll go when we get to our loser category, so don't you worry about that. I got something for you here. I'll be coming in hot. But let's start with the winners of this weekend, Fresh. Who was your first winner?
Well, because I know what you're going to go with the loser, I'll hold off on my on something there. But I'll start off with the men of Troy, especially the man of Troy,
Hell
Caleb
yeah.
Williams. Um, he burst onto the scene. He has taken reins, in my opinion, of the Heisman campaign. With
Yep.
Blake Corum not being able to play versus Ohio State, and not having a Heisman moment, if you will, Caleb Williams took advantage of the past 2 weeks and has been torching people. And if you look at this past week versus Notre Dame, it was probably the best defense they've played. Utah, close second. Oregon State's decent, pretty solid. But that Notre Dame defense was going to be the biggest test. And he comes out there, throws for 232 and a touchdown, and then runs for 35 and 3 scores. But the offense as a whole, they mixed it and matched it. Everyone was involved. And Austin Jones ran for 154. That Trojan offense looked good. And then they played solid defense. They didn't play sloppy like they played versus UCLA, even though granted UCLA is probably a better offense than Notre Dame. They played like a team that was focused, a team that knows they have a purpose and a drive. And now, I mean, they have everything in front of them. They have a chance to make the playoff. They have a chance to get revenge versus Utah in Vegas. Now, pause moment. Last year, Oregon thought they had a chance to get revenge in the championship game, and they got steamrolled again. So you can't celebrate your success at this point. You still have a long way to go, and that means beating Utah and winning the Pac-12. But for what Caleb Williams has done in that first year, constantly continue every single week getting better. I mean, in the offense evolving week over week, defense making slight improvements. I don't think that they're an elite defense, but they do just enough if that offense is scoring. If the offense isn't scoring, you might have problems. But right now, they haven't had that issue in about 3 or 4, maybe even 5 weeks. So that offense, as the season's gone on, they are peaking at the right time coming in, and they're making statements. So interesting to see what happens when they take on Utah in Vegas on Friday night in the Pac-12 title game. But this team has a pretty good hold on a playoff berth, and it could be a start of things to come there for the men of Troy.
Yeah, I questioned Austin Jones in our preview about this, and the kid balled out. Give him a lot of credit, pat him on the back as well. I know Caleb Williams is going to get the headline clippings. He's going to be the one on the front page of the newspaper out there on the West Coast. But it's Austin Jones, and his 6.2 yards a carry in this game was the big difference maker. And also Bullock over there getting the interception, that was huge for them. You look at that defense, they were opportunistic, and they wound up taking advantage of everything that they could. But I will say this, I was impressed with the Irish's fight. They wound up really fighting back for it. They didn't just roll over. I thought that at some point, USC could get really this ball rolling down the hill, and that Notre Dame would kind of back off and you smack them in the mouth. Notre Dame played well. They played well. They lost. They're beaten by the better team, but you kind of have to tip your caps to them and say, yeah, you were a good opponent and you gave us your best shot. So kudos to USC right there.
Marcus Freeman definitely showed that he's the right head coach for that team. He evolved over as the season's gone on, done a great job.
Fresh. Okay, my first winner is the TCU Horned Frogs. Everyone is doubting TCU for weeks on end. We have heard, oh, TCU's, it's this week. This week is TCU's going to be upset. No, wait, it wasn't that week. It's this week that TCU is going to get upset. No, it's this week that TCU is going to get upset. And folks, Max Duggan is the real deal. 212, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. The Horned Frogs put up 62 points on Matt Campbell and the Iowa State Cyclones. I get it. I know this isn't the same Iowa State as last year, but Matt Campbell's a fairly decent coach, and he will usually have the defense ready to play. The fact that these guys dropped a 62 spot on them is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, this is absolutely insane. They wound up having 2 interceptions on the game. TCU is ready for Kansas State. I can't wait to see that matchup in the Big 12 title game. And that's what everyone, and sure enough, the minute that this game was over, I was on Twitter late last night, and I know Twitter's not the real world, but I also started hearing, well, TCU is going to lose in the Big 12 title game. I finally just go, what do they have to do? At what point do you go, hey, that's a pretty damn good football team over there. We need to give them the respect that they deserve. They're 12-0. They're 12-0, and they have gone through. Yes, have they had some close calls? Absolutely. What team hasn't? but they've done everything that you could have asked them to do. TCU, big winner this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I love the way they came out with a fire to take care of business. Don't mess around. Don't leave it up for chance, and don't even put it in the committee's hands. Don't like, oh, they won 23-20. They're undefeated. They took control of the game and dominated. And I'll tell you right now, the way that K-State played versus Kansas and the way that they played, and they had their matchup early in the year, which was a great one. This is going to be another, last year's was a defensive barn burner, a defensive brawl. This one's going to be an exciting matchup. There's going to be a lot of points in Jerry World between K-State and TCU, but it's going to be a fun one to watch. But I think TCU wanted to show, that they are truly legit. And if they have a chance to go out and take care of K-State, supplanting themselves, not just as, a playoff team, but as truly, we are one of the best 4 teams in this country.
All right, Fresh, who's your next winner?
South Carolina Gamecocks. Shane Beamer. Hey, I'm not going to lie. After that Florida game a couple weeks ago when you guys got curb stomped in the swamp, it was probably, I'm sure you even had doubters all around Columbia, all around the state. And the way that you got the team to focus, buy in, and play with a reckless abandon versus Tennessee, get the huge win, and then instead of dropping off after that huge win, sort of like you had that come back to earth moment, you gathered it up, you took a deep breath, and then you went after your big rival who's owned the state for a long, long time recently, and you went into their house, and you played a scrappy football game, and Rattler made throws, and then Beamer ball came in, and you had the fumble at the end of on the punt to seal the deal. The team believes. They believe in each other. They believe in you. You have led this. You have built this program in the past 2 years from the ashes of where it was, and now you have them as a serious program on the rise. It's gonna be interesting to see where they go from next year. Now you have this huge, 2 huge wins, 2 top 10 wins to finish off your regular season. You go into your bowl game, going to find out where that's going to be at. How do you take that into recruiting? How do you take that into 2023? Because now you're in that year 3 moment, Shane. You have the momentum. You've shown that you can do it, and you get the team there. You can go places in South Carolina. Spurrier won there. You can win there. It's going to be interesting to see how he takes this and how he uses the big springboard into the recruiting period, into spring, and into next season. But great job by South Carolina. You've beaten your biggest rival. You have that, feather in your cap, and you are moving forward in the right direction.
So I love this about South Carolina because I feel like they are now poised to take that spot as the number 3 team in the SEC West. You'll have Georgia on the SEC East. In the SEC East. Georgia will be number 1. Tennessee, they're number 2. And that number 3 spot is up for grabs. And I think going into next season, it's not outrageous for us to think it's South Carolina. They had a fantastic game. And you take a look at this, they got torched on the ground. Will Shipley just absolutely torched them on the ground. But you see what they did when DJU went back to pass. He's completing less than a third of his passes. It was almost like a borderline a fourth of his passes, not quite yet there, but completing less than 31%, something like that. This was a great win by South Carolina. You guys should be flying pretty high. And anyone who said that there wasn't a difference between South Carolina playing at Clemson during the day and playing at Clemson during the night, I think this kind of proves there's a difference in Death Valley when you play a night game there compared to a day game.
They took advantage of the situation, and they all have bought in, which is just a fantastic thing.
All right, Fresh. My next winner, they built the dam. They built the dam around the water. The Ducks were looking for it. My next winner is the Oregon State Beavers. Whew! What a game by them. 268 yards on the ground. They threw the ball only 13 times in this game. They just kept the ball on the ground. Damian Martinez was the leading rusher. We told you about him in our preview episode. We said that this was a possible game that you could see a huge upset there. Was Oregon looking ahead to the Pac-12 title game? Were they looking ahead saying, we're already in there. We're going to get past this. And we told you, be careful that this Oregon State team isn't a single player. It's not a single player that's going to dominate there. It is going to be a team effort. You look at this, it's insane to me that Oregon State won this. They lost the time of possession battle. They lost the turnover battle. They were outgained by 150 yards, but they took advantage when it mattered the most. The defense played the bend, don't break mentality. They wound up taking care of business. They only faced 9 third downs in this game. That showed you how efficient they were there. Fresh. I gotta tip my cap to Oregon State because that was an impressive win by them. I'm glad that they won. What was this one called? The Civil War, I think it used to be called the Civil War.
The artist formerly known as the Civil War. I mean, I had them as a winner too. And just the first thing I put in is resilient. And yes, you might think that we're actually reading because we're reading our own notes. We're not reading articles from somebody else. But yeah, resiliency, because you just mentioned all the stats that if you just look at the stat sheet, they should have gotten beat by 20. But they found ways to win. They found ways to scrap through, just like South Carolina did. The stat sheet sometimes doesn't really tell the full story because the effort on the field is different. The situational awareness, getting off the field, making stops in the red zone where you're allowing field goals instead of touchdowns. But the way that they ran the football down their throat, imposed their will on Oregon, you only threw for 60 yards. Like, they didn't even have to worry about throwing the football game, and they were still able to win that football game by 3. Absolute, Dan Lanning, past 3 weeks, you're going to do some soul searching here. You kind of choke it away at home versus Washington. You have a brawl versus Utah. You survive. And then this game, you lose by 3. You've lost close games, but they've always come in the late in that fourth quarter where the team collapses. And there's always some of those head-scratching decisions by Dan. Your first head coaching opportunity, maybe not fully comfortable in your decisions and what you actually want to do in situations, but bringing that team together, getting them tougher, I think, needs to be the focus for Dan and going forward with Oregon. Finding a toughness, finding resiliency. Because they were flashy early. They got obviously whooped by Georgia in week 1. They rebounded and played real flashy, real solid. And then when Bo Nix got dinged up and that offensive juggernaut was sort of taken away and sort of drawn back a little bit, the defense couldn't get the stops and the offense wasn't scoring as quick or as much as they usually have. And that's where the problems came up from there. So they have to find a more of a focused team where if the quarterback does get dinged up, that you can be a little more organized and find ways to still win the football game and not be so reliant on him running around and making plays as your only hope and your only resource. But, major props to the Beavers there at Oregon State. Always love to get a great rivalry win and a major jump in bowls picking for them as well.
Yeah. I don't necessarily think I'm going to ever have to be a closet Oregon State fan. I think maybe I should just start putting that fandom out there in the public eye. But
Definitely.
I loved it, man. I loved the fact I wound up watching that part at the end of that game. So, all right, Fresh. I got 1 or 2 more winners here. You got any more?
I got 2 winners. There's actually a lot. I'm just going to go ahead and say it now. I mean, it's the obvious one, but Michigan was an amazing winner. I'll let you talk about your Buckeyes later, but the way that Michigan played with focus, because honestly, I didn't see them coming into the football game, especially after the Illinois game the week before, with that physical mentality at the line of scrimmage, the way they run the football. Without Blake Corum, and that defense stood tall. I've been wrong. I've been doubting Michigan all year long, and this is my mea culpa moment. I'm sorry. You guys have proven me wrong. You've shut me up. J.J. McCarthy did what he had to do. He threw a couple of touchdowns. He was able to run for a score. And Edwards had a couple long runs late in the football game to seal it. But Michigan came with a toughness and a physicality that is a sign of this program what Jim Harbaugh's put in this past 2 years. And I don't see that if this continues, I don't see them going away for a while. I'm not saying they're going to continue to win 5 or 7 or 8 in a row versus Ohio State, but they are going to be on the map. Michigan's going nowhere. They're just doing it a different way, and they're doing it tough. They're doing it resilient. They're going to run the football and play defense and throw when they have to. They don't want to throw because they need to. They're going to throw when they have to. And it's going to be a big thing coming. They're going to be a force in the playoff, whoever they get.
Yeah, Wolverines had a great game out of them. Donovan Edwards playing with the broken hand. You take a look at what he did. 216 on the ground, 2 touchdowns as well. And McCarthy played well. He played well. You can't take that away from made some big-time throws when he needed to. I was hoping that the Buckeyes would do a little bit more and were able to force him to throw a little bit more than what they're doing, but Wolverines big winner can't discount what they did on the scoreboard. No one really goes into Columbus and beats the Buckeyes by 22 points, but I'll get into that here later. Fresh, I kind of have a 1A and 1B as my last two winners there, and I'll go real quick on them. Mississippi State, Hail State, man, that was a classic game. Great way to kind of wrap up your Thanksgiving. If some of you guys were probably watching pro football, we flipped over and watched the Mississippi State Ole Miss game coming home from Thanksgiving. Phenomenal ending of that game. If you haven't seen the end of that game, make sure you go out of your way. Check that one out because that was a great win by the Pirate over there. Got the marquee win over Lane Kiffin. And then I love the fact, too, Lane Kiffin signed an extension. And then my other winner here, Fresh, before we get over to the losers, is the Penn State Nittany Lions, man. Beating up on Michigan State. I know that Michigan State is not what they were last year, but Sean Clifford ending his career at Penn State with 4 touchdowns, and then Michigan State or Penn State running for 160 yards rushing there. Penn State's only 2 losses this year are to Ohio State and Michigan, which is really respectable. You sit there, they take a look, they didn't slip up any other place there. I know there's a lot of questions about James Franklin and winning the big one there, but he's got to get credit where credit's due. He's won 10 games there, and he also took care of a really difficult task of going down south and being an SEC team earlier in the year. So props to Penn State. Impressive win out of them. I got them as a winner too.
And my last winner, Florida State. You start off the year by beating LSU. You end the year by beating your state rival in Florida. It was a little, the defense optional there in the first quarter. So it's kind of, what's going on, what's happening, where's the focus, as rivalry game kind of let it flow. But in that third quarter, Jordan Travis and the Noles took over, and they imposed their will. They did whatever they wanted to do against that Florida defense in the second half. And, Travis showing that he is that true quarterback and that Mike Norvell has the team focused, and they actually are all playing as one. And the way the week ended with, other action happening in the ACC, Florida State's the best football team at this moment right now, in my opinion, in the ACC at this very level. They are playing the best at the end of the season. They had a couple of hiccups there early in the year with Clemson, NC State back to back, but at this very moment right now, they are the best team because they are playing at the greatest level right now and winning football games decisively. Jordan Travis, great job running the football, great job throwing. I do want to say, sometimes maybe dive head first and try to get that first down. Instead of sliding, where the slide starting might be a short first down. You had a couple of those come back, and you eventually got the first downs and touchdowns out of it. But dive a little bit, extend the football, stay low, keep yourself protected. But the start of the slide might cost you half a yard like it did on Friday night. But great job all around. Mike Norvell, we were truly wrong about you at the very beginning of the year. You have proven us wrong, and you have marched this team back to a solid standing in the ACC and in the country.
Yeah. All right, Fresh, let's go losers here. And you know what? Might as well just get it out of the way. Ohio State, you're a loser this weekend. And it pains me to say this one because I'm pissed. I'm pissed. There's no better way around it. I was livid when the game ended. I'm not one to always be, live and die by these games. But 22 points to your rival in your home stadium is completely unacceptable. We knew that they were going to run the football. I knew it. Fresh knew it. Everyone else who listens to it knew that they were running the football. And you defensively didn't fully prepare to being able to stop the Russian attack. I went back and I watched the game. So I didn't want to say like, okay, I'm going to be a prisoner of the moment. I'm going to sit there and just whatever the hot take I can make right now is going to be. I sit back and I waited until Sunday afternoon. I sat down and I went back and watched parts of that game and seeing how the linebackers didn't hit the hole. And there's one of the time where the linebacker is just standing there and the guy just runs right past him. The safety snaps the ball. You're a second and a half into the play and the safety has not taken a step. The wide receivers are running past them, but you haven't moved. And I was trying to watch as much from the all 11 game film there as well. Ohio State, I'm not going to be a one. I don't think the fans should be calling for Ryan Day's job. I know that was the hot thing on social media. That's ridiculous. Don't even get me started on that part right there as well. Because the fact that you want to sit there and say like, oh, well, he just doesn't get it, doesn't get like the Michigan thing. I think he does get the Michigan thing, but that's another conversation for another time. There's got to be questions had. There's got to be conversations had. From right now, from here on out, you have 362 days until you play that team again. Your conversations, your preparation for that game begins right now. All the offensive stats. You went away from the run in the second half. You threw the ball 48 times in this game. I get it. You're down your lead running back. I get it. Your backup running back was not doing very well. But Michigan ran the same defense that Notre Dame ran at the beginning of the year. They ran a two-deep safety the entire time, kept everything in front of them. What did you do to beat Notre Dame? Is you ran the football. Ryan Day went away from the run. Defensively, guys were out of positions. Guys were running into each other. They didn't understand their matchup there. It was execution. Because if you look at the start of the play and what the defense was lined up in, it looked like it was going to be a pretty effective defense. And then you see players running into each other. You see guys just slipping free, getting wide open. They don't know who has who's going to match up with this person. I like Jim Knowles as a defensive coordinator. I'm not ready to fire Jim Knowles either, because I don't think you fire a guy after one loss in one game in his first year. But I have a lot of conversations that need to be had. A lot of talk needs to come down and say, what are we going to do to beat this team? You need to come out and make a statement. You don't need to guarantee a victory. You don't need to guarantee that you're going to win. Look at what Tressel did when he first came onto the scene from Youngstown State. He said to the Ohio State fans at a basketball game, you're going to be proud about your kids in the classroom. You're going to be proud about these kids in the community. And you're going to be proud about them in 200 and some odd days in Ann Arbor, Michigan. That's what you need to say. You need to say that these guys are going to be preparing for this all year. All the offensive firepower, all that stuff, great. But you guys need to recruit better at the defensive back position, because the defensive backs, they weren't the answer there. You need to get nastier. You need to not make dumb penalties about headbutting somebody. I could go on and on right now. I'm not in the camp of firing anybody. My problem is this. There's too many bad stories out there of teams firing good head coaches or kind of mutually separating. Michigan moves away from Lloyd Carr. They spend 2 years with Rich Rod and Brady Hoke before they find Harbaugh. You take a look at Texas. Texas is still trying to recover from Mac Brown. You take a look at Florida. Florida's still trying to recover from Urban. USC is finally recovering from Pete Carroll. Oklahoma, oh dear Lord, look at what happened to them. I can go. Notre Dame still is not where they should be. I could go on and on. Tennessee, and naming all of these different programs. Appreciate what you do have and see how you can adjust and make it work next time. You need to have those conversations. You need to start saying, what are we going to do to beat this person? Yes, it's going to be great to win a national title, but the first thing comes into it is, number one, every single year, your first goal is to beat the team up north, and that's it. All the other stuff will come into play later, but that is the number one goal every single year. Every Buckeye fan knows that. Every Ohioan knows that. And every person up in that state up north knows that that is the number one goal every single year. There needs to be changes. Absolutely, there needs to be changes. But we need to be careful about what we're going to do there.
My only response to that is firing Ryan Day is ridiculous. You look at his track record since he's taken over, playoffs twice, played for national championship once. If you're going to come in 11-1 back-to-back years, or 11-1 and 10-2, you're going to go to the Rose Bowl most likely 2 years in a row. If going to the Rose Bowl at 11-1 is a fireable offense, then people really need to evaluate life priorities and truly, understand that where you're at is where about 128 programs in the country want to be every single year. And it's now the funny part. My loser for this week is the call for a 12-team playoff, because that game on Saturday between Ohio State and Michigan wouldn't have meant a thing. The pain of losing or the celebration of winning would not have mattered, because both teams would have made the playoff. Clemson losing to South Carolina wouldn't have mattered, because they probably would have been in the top 12 and made the playoff. All these games where these teams were like, you know what, they fall down, they lose, and they might have choked, like UNC losing. They might have fallen from 12 to 13, you never know. But the playoff at 12 made all those games not as impactful, and not just this past weekend, but even the weekends before, where you water down the regular season and you allow one or two losses to become a playoff, where we want to have the elite teams in. Up to this point of the four, there's always been a blowout in every single one of the playoffs. And that's the top four teams in the country that everyone sees. We start bringing in 12, that means regular season games don't mean anything, rivalry games mean less, and you start getting blowouts in the first round of the playoffs at a much more higher level. Instead of one game, you have 3 or 4, which is bad for TV, bad for fans. It just allows us to yell and scream more if we want to, but it becomes less of a product. That's the other side of, we want to have more teams involved, everyone getting a say like the NFL, but are all those teams truly quality? And that's where the loser of where that actually argument is between a 14 playoff and a 12-team playoff. I think it took a big hit, and it really shows that 4 is truly the elite number. But TV is going to ruin it and push it to 12.
And Fresh, I want to also put one other thing out here. I've seen a lot of Buckeye fans saying, we got John Cooper 2.0 here for Ohio State. John Cooper lost a grand total of 21 games in his first 5 years at Ohio State. He lost 21 games in 5 years. He's averaging 4 losses a season. And you want to be ticked about Ryan Day losing 1 or 2? I get it. It's against Michigan. I get that. I understand. We don't want to lose to them. I hate losing them. I hate it just as much as everyone else does. But I'm sitting there, take a deep breath, people. Relax for a second. Because look at this. John Cooper, 1989, second season, gets to Ohio State, to the Hall of Fame Bowl, the Liberty Bowl, the Hall of Fame Bowl, the Citrus Bowl, the Holiday Bowl. These aren't like marquee matchups back then. It's ridiculous. All right, Fresh. We could go on and on for that. You got any more losers? I got like 2 more.
I got 2 more, but let's talk about the UNC Tar Heels.
You got one of them.
Yikes. I mean,
it's a great game, though. It was a great game.
The past years have been both amazing, exciting football games, but you lose to Georgia Tech the week before, who actually played pretty well in the first quarter, first half, versus Georgia. But you think that, what? We need to be motivated, come in on fire, get ourselves clicking when we come into the ACC title game versus Clemson, maybe finish on a high note. You laid an egg. You allowed an offense from NC State, which has been reeling for a while and not its true self, to navigate and put points on the board. But your offense has died. Drake May, the past 2 weeks, and that offense have done next to nothing compared to what they have up to that point in the previous 10 games. It has been rough. They're not getting loose in the running game. The passing game is definitely faded at a rapid rate. The points in the scoreboard have dropped. I think that's the more alarming thing. It's not the team is just losing, but the offense has completely just gone away. Mac Brown, you got a week to get ready for Clemson. They're going to be reeling and angry. you're reeling and angry. This might be a program-defining football game because you lose 3 straight to basically end the regular season, going into bowl and having a real special season, and then just fading off into oblivion. That could really hurt. Like we talked about, Florida State already charging up and really becoming a factor in the scene. Who knows who's going to take over a head coach at Georgia Tech? And they've played with some fire the past few weeks. You never know how NC State will be able to respond next year. What's going to come from Pitt, from Syracuse? Does Miami even get off the map? And you don't want to fade and fall into an oblivion and get caught. You have a chance to strike now and a chance to win. You've got to maximize it. You haven't done it the past 2 weeks, and that's an alarming thing. If I'm a UNC fan, if I'm a UNC player, if I'm a UNC coach, Mac Brown, get control of your program, not from a discipline perspective because the guys are good that way, but focus on the field to go win a football game. Clemson is beatable. Clemson is beatable. This is your one chance to go out and win a crown and get, hey, you know what? You win, you go into the Orange Bowl. An Orange Bowl for UNC after this year would be an amazing achievement and put you back on the map, really help with recruiting. If you don't, who knows where you're going to be at? What, in the Cheez-It Bowl in Orlando? So, big opportunity here. You can't lose 3 in a row and really fade to oblivion.
Yeah. I had UNC as well. But the Cheez-It Bowl in Orlando sounds delicious.
As long as you get free snacks.
Yeah, as long as I get free Cheez-Its, man. I do love Cheez-Its. No, North Carolina, and again, the Wolfpack, man, that defense really, with everything that's happened to NC State this year, it could have been very easy for them just to kind of call it in. Ben Finley, man, played out of his mind, but Drake May, where you at? Averaging 4.8 yards a pass? Like, really? You are a Heisman candidate? Yeesh. Josh Downs, 6 catches, 51 yards? Yeesh. There's a lot, man. Like, North Carolina needs to be better. I think that NC State's defense is pretty damn good, and we'll see what North Carolina, but you got a chance for a redemption, North Carolina. Not everyone has that, so best of luck to you guys next Saturday. All right, Fresh, my next loser is the LSU Tigers. Oh my God. You lost to a joke of a program. You lost to the program that they're having craziness go inside the locker room, suspending kids for the whole year. Lost to App State. You lost to Texas A&M. And now you have to go, like, seriously, what's the spread for the SEC title game? Like, is it 15? Is it double? It should be at least 15, if not 20.
Last I saw was 14.5.
I'm taking Georgia in the points now. This is a joke for LSU. This is an absolute joke. I don't know if you were looking ahead to the SEC title game. I don't know. But this is ridiculous. And it shows me that LSU, like, I know there's like this quiet murmur of people like, hey, what if LSU pulls the upset over Georgia? And I go, there is no way that is happening after that one. Because there's no way you let a kid run for 215 yards on 38 carries. You gave up 274 yards on the ground to Texas A&M. Georgia's running backs, I think their 4th string running back would probably be the starting running back on A&M. Probably. Those guys are going to run all over you. That's going to be like a 56-0 game. And LSU will punch a touchdown in. I'm sorry. It'll be a 56-7 game. LSU, you have a nice win against Alabama this year, but when the losses you have are terrible. Florida State at the beginning of the year, that was a terrible loss there. That's a game you should have won. You get boat raced by Tennessee, and then you just get absolutely shellacked by Texas A&M. LSU be better.
No, I did have LSU as a loser as well. The way that I think it's just more of a mindset and not being mature enough to handle where they're at. A couple weeks ago, they go to Arkansas. They find a way to survive that game, win the West. They take on UAB at home. during senior day, and then they travel to A&M. They probably figure, hey, it's A&M. They're terrible. We're in the SEC title game. I think part of it's looking ahead, preparing, maybe not playing with as much effort, not showing as much to Georgia. They want to keep stuff under wraps and they try to play maybe a little vanilla. But the thing is, there's you bleep around and you find out. And I think, what Georgia was doing versus Georgia Tech early on in the football game is very similar, where they messed around a little bit. Offense was struggling, couldn't score from the 1 yard line, trying to run the football and not getting it done there. They were able to sort of rally, figure it out, and beat a lesser opponent. LSU was messing around a little early, and then before they knew it, oh crap, we're in a football game. We've got to get going, and they couldn't get themselves in the right direction, couldn't turn around and focus and go win a football game. Offensively, Jalen Daniels probably no passing help. They contain him in the running game. His legs have been the biggest weapon for the Tigers all year. And then him with the running backs that build off of that, and then the passing game. It's not been Kayshon Boutte has not been the 1,000-yard receiver, super air out we thought we were going to see. He's been a playmaker on the offense, but he's not been that guy. The rest of the receivers in that squad have not been the dominant passing, offense of the 2019 Tigers we saw. This offense was built to run the football, use the tight ends, and use Daniels' legs. And they got behind, and they couldn't get it. Now, as a Georgia fan, I'm actually kind of worried they lost because now they're going to have a little extra anger. They're going to come in with a little focus. Do I think there's a talent gap? Yes, there's a talent gap. But it's going to cause LSU, they have their moment now. You've been exposed. You've been ridiculed. What kind of Tiger team shows up? They own the Dogs in the Dome. They're 3-1 in SEC title games. I'll say it's history and it's not current roster. But do you find ways to get yourself straight and make it a football game and try to pull off an upset? Because the effort you put out there last week gives nobody any clue that that's actually going to happen.
Joe Burrow ain't walking through that door. Jamar Chase ain't walking through that door. OBJ ain't walking through that door. Jarvis Landry ain't walking through that door. Heck, Jamarcus Russell ain't walking through that door.
He'll throw it from his knees, though.
He will. And be like 4 Bills. Dude, I know. I get it. You're playing it safe because you're a Georgia fan. As a person who doesn't have a rooting interest in that game, I'm just gonna call it like it is and call it like I see it, just because I'm really like down on LSU right at the moment because of how bad how bad I view that loss to Texas A&M is. I'm taking Georgia in the points. I don't even care what the spread. Like, I'm asking you, what's the spread? Oh, 14.5? Nah, give me Georgia in the points. I don't like it. All right, man. Well, that's all we got for this week of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. It's been a great season here, fresh. It's weird. We're done with the regular season. We got conference title games, and then we got bowls to talk about, playoffs to talk about. Hopefully, I'll be in a better mood by the time we get to that. I should be. Give me another day or so.
All right. Bowl season, a lot of fun. You get that, last 10 days of the year, last 15 days of the year, just games on all over the country and cool matchups. It gets a lot exciting. Now, I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to call my shot right now. I'm picking the New Year's Six bowl games in our playoff. So I already have Michigan, USC are going to play, and Georgia, TCU are going to play in the playoff. And in the Rose Bowl, Ohio State, Utah, we get another classic rematch. Orange Bowl, I want to see Clemson and Tennessee in the Orange Bowl. That's a perfect, setup. Just have a full stadium of orange. A Clemson defense versus Tennessee offense. Which one actually shows up and puts up tons of points? That'd be a fun one. The Sugar Bowl, I know everyone's going to hate it, but Alabama's going to get the Sugar Bowl spot. They're just going to finish in the top 6. Just accept it now. It's going to happen. The committee's going to put them there. And they're going to take on Kansas State. And then UCF is going to beat Tulane in the AAC title game. They're going to be the highest ranked group of 5 team. UCF and Gus Malzahn are going to take on Penn State in the Cotton Bowl in Dallas. That's my New Year's Six bowl picks. I'm calling it right now on November, the 27th. That's what's going to happen right there.
Yeah. I think it's going to be Georgia, USC, and Michigan, TCU. I think just because of the undefeatedness of it, but that'll just be my thought.
Either way, you got to play somebody sometime.
Yeah. Hey, we'll see how it is, man. We'll talk more about that on Tuesday, though, when we get to record. All right, folks, you've been listening to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. I want to send a special thank you to our producer, Drew. Without him, none of this is possible. So thanks to him for everything he's doing behind the scenes there. If you haven't, like, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, Amazon Pods, anything Pods. I don't know. There are a bunch of them. I think, by season 3, I'll learn them all. If you're watching us on the YouTube, make sure you subscribe to that Spinnable Sports channel. Hit that notification bell. Get notified every single time we drop some new episodes out there. We will keep having episodes every single week for you guys, so we'll keep producing content even though college football is winding down. And make sure you're visiting spinnablesports.com for all your sport needs. We got stuff out there all the time. I'm working on a few things. Fresh is working on different things. We like putting stuff out there for you guys. So make sure you're visiting there. And we'll be back at you to preview all of the conference title games next week.
Championship weekend. Let's get after it.
All right. Have a good night, y'all.
Bye, y'all.